There is a planet that is more polluted, more suffocated, and more overheated than planet Earth itself. And this planet is not out there. It is inside each one of us. It is the mind planet. While the entire world worries about global warming, carbon emissions, and the future of the environment, we are silently destroying the most important environment of all, the one that determines how we live, how we relate, and how we experience every second of our existence. Never in the history of humanity have we conspired so much against our own emotional health and against the future of our species as we are doing now. And the most frightening thing is that we do this without realizing it, through something so simple and so constant that we don't even pay attention to it: thought. Let's start with a question that seems obvious but that nobody really stops to answer with depth. Is thought virtual or real? Think about it for a moment. When you talk to someone you love, when a professional treats a patient in crisis, when a parent guides a child through their conflicts, is the thought being used in these interactions virtual or real? Most people have never stopped to truly think about this. Even masters and doctors in psychology, when confronted with this question, are left without an answer. And this is a huge problem, because this is the essence of what we are. When you eat bread, you know you are eating carbohydrates, because this has been studied, systematized, taught. But unfortunately, the nature of thought, the process of thought construction, has never been studied in a systematic way. This was a gigantic gap in science that prevented us from developing tools to protect the mind and prevent emotional disorders. Here is the fundamental discovery that changes everything. Thought is immaterial, it is virtual, it never incorporates the reality of the object being thought about. You can produce millions of thoughts about a glass of water, but you will never incorporate the reality of that object. You can treat thousands of people in the most diverse emotional dramas, but between you and these people, there is an insurmountable space. And you can only truly get close to them if you empty yourself of your theory, of your ego, of your neurotic need to intervene. If a parent does not empty themselves, they are arguing with the child, but talking about themselves. A judge before a defendant, if they do not empty themselves, may be interfering in the judgment process, talking about themselves, and not truly interpreting the nuances of the defendant. This has never been deeply studied. So if thought is virtual, why do we suffer so much? Why do we fight? Why do we raise our voices? Why do we criticize others without stopping? Because we believe that thought is real. We believe that if we repeat a criticism 3, 4, 5 times, we will change the person. But we don't change them. That's why a person who criticizes the same thing twice is already considered annoying. 3 times becomes a complainer. 4 times or more becomes unbearable. Almost all people raise their hands when asked if they criticize the same thing 4 times or more. And why do we repeat the same correction infinitely? Because we believe that thought can change people's memory, can change emotionality, anguish, stubbornness, impulsiveness. But we cannot change this way. We have to make a radical paradigm shift. We have to leave the era of pointing out faults and enter the era of celebrating successes. You don't need to learn to point out faults. This is natural, this is historical, this is ontological. It is in the nature of human beings throughout all our history. But when we start to observe small behaviors worthy of being applauded, and we start to tell people that they are incredible, that they are amazing, something magical happens. When parents start doing this with children, when executives do this with employees, instead of being critics, they start generating positive emotionality. And here is another revolutionary concept. We have an intellectuality that is virtual and an emotionality that is real. Emotion is completely different from thought. When you feel, you truly feel. Emotion is real. If you are feeling pain, no matter how you intellectually define this pain, whether as anguish, anxiety, or sad mood, you are feeling real suffering. So we have two completely different worlds operating inside us. A hyper-creative world that leads us to think about the future, ruminate on the past, build characters, projects, dreams, thousands of environments and fantasies every day, including when we sleep in dreams. And we have a world that can be dragged by thoughts, which is emotionality, and that's where the danger lies. Imagine you are going to give a lecture. The fear of public speaking, called glossophobia, affects about 75% of people, even very cultured and intelligent people. At the exact moment you are before the audience, various triggers are detonated. Not just the content you're going to present, but the audience gives signals. Someone yawns, someone is distracted looking at their cell phone, and this detonates more triggers, opens windows in your memory. If it opens traumatic windows which contain the fear of failing, the fear of not meeting expectations, you not only produce negative thoughts, but these thoughts drag the emotion. This principle of dragging is what creates mental prisons. If you just thought about the future but didn't give credit to that thought, you wouldn't suffer about the future. But when you give autogenous credibility to these thoughts, when you deeply believe that you have no value, that you are not important, that you are not intelligent enough, this credibility becomes like having money in the bank. If you believe you have reserves, you are secure. If you don't believe, you run to the bank and the system can break. In the human mind, there is a credibility system that can lead a human being to be imprisoned, trapped, suffocated, or it can make them free, the protagonist of their own story. And this is completely new from a sociological, psychiatric, psychological, and philosophical point of view. The environment we are in, the social environment, stimulates every day an unconscious phenomenon that has also never been adequately described before. Everything that has high emotional volume, if it has pain, anxiety, anguish, rejections, is recorded in a privileged way through a phenomenon called automatic memory recording. The brain's biographer will record these experiences in a highlighted way. So taking care of what we think and taking care of the dragging of emotion, the credit we give to thoughts, is taking care of our life, our history, our mental health, our freedom. But no university in the world teaches this. The best academic institutions on the planet don't teach anything about these phenomena. We don't teach that there is a self that has to manage emotion. We don't teach that you have to challenge disturbing thoughts and tense emotions in the first 5 seconds. Otherwise, they are recorded and can no longer be deleted. How are you going to preserve the mind planet if your self is not a good executive of the only company that cannot go bankrupt? If you are not a good director of the script of the only play you have to direct, because it is the only one that is yours. If you are not a competent pilot of your own mental aircraft so that you can have adequate flight plans. These 5 seconds are the gap, the window of opportunity. If you don't record in these first 5 seconds, the recording doesn't happen. But if it does happen, you never delete your fears, you never delete your anguishes, you never delete your traumas. You can only re-edit them. You can graft new experiences onto the location of traumatic windows or build healthy windows parallel around the traumatic core. These traumatic windows, let's call them killer windows, and the healthy windows, light windows. They determine how you react to the world, how you feel, how you live each day of your life. Think of someone who has been repeatedly betrayed throughout life, perhaps starting with their own father. This person has accumulated such powerful killer windows that they may reach the point of thinking about taking their own life. Every 40 seconds, someone commits suicide in the world. Every 4 seconds, someone tries. And every person who thinks about dying doesn't want to kill life. They want to eliminate their pain, their anguish, their self-abandonment. Just knowing this is already transformative. These people are hungry and thirsty to live. They just want to tame the mental ghosts that inhabit their minds. The problem is that the self of these people has not been fed, has not been nurtured to understand the contradictions of the mind, the conflicts and mental prisons. The self has not been empowered. And how do we empower the self? There is a powerful technique that can completely change a person's trajectory. It's called doubt, criticize, and determine. First, doubt. Doubt is powerful for the self to challenge, disagree, and confront traumatic windows. If you don't doubt everything that controls you, everything you believe will become a mental prison. You need to doubt with authority. Doubt that you will be a slave to the fear of public speaking. Doubt that you will take your life. Doubt that you have no value. Second, criticism. Criticism is the principle of wisdom in psychology, just as doubt is in philosophy. You have to criticize toxic thoughts every day, but not criticize as a victim, but as a protagonist, as the author of your own story, with authority, seriously disagreeing with your position of bowing to pain and becoming its slave. And third, determine or decide. Every day, every human being has to make choices. Choose what? Choose to be a manager of emotion. Because emotion by itself is dumb, unintelligent, unconscious, it cannot self-manage. Emotion does not have emotional intelligence. This is an attribute of the self, which has the capacity for choice, critical consciousness, autonomy, self-determination. The past explains our present, but cannot explain our future. If we let it explain, we will never be authors of our own story. The past explains the pain, explains why people betrayed us, suffocated us, did not value us to the stature we deserve. It explains our present, but can never explain what we will build from here forward. When a person is a victim, even if they have real reasons to feel small, hurt, wounded, excluded, they remove their self from the position of protagonist of the theater of their mind. They will no longer direct their script because they will always place other people as responsible for their ills. Yes, these people provoked a series of killer windows, but the problem is not what others did with the pain. The problem is what you do from this pain to become someone who leads the mind and is not led by it. When you were abandoned, when you were rejected, the first thing you should proclaim is, whoever lost was the other person. Whoever lost was whoever abandoned you, because you are an incredible, intelligent, wonderful, altruistic, beautiful person, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You transform the traitor not into your tormentor. You recognize that the traitor lost because you become someone who rewrites your own story. This is the essence of becoming a protagonist. If you learn and train yourself not to buy what doesn't belong to you, people can offend you, can criticize you, can exclude you, but your emotional health is untouchable. Why? Because what others say is virtual. They are just sounds. If no one physically hurts you, no one can hurt you. No one has the power to emotionally hurt you unless your self consents. Intellectuality is virtual. The thought of the other, the rejection of the other, is virtual. It only becomes real when you give autogenous credibility. Then you drag and transform what is sterile from the other into something real in your emotion. That's why the mind lies. The worst enemies are not outside us, they are inside us. It is our self that does not assume its role as pilot of the human mind, as executive of the only company that cannot go bankrupt. Before companies go bankrupt or enter decline, leaders collapse. Because we have not been trained from an educational point of view to intervene on the mind planet. We have not been trained to understand that any offense, rejection, criticism, and exclusion is virtual. It only becomes real if our self is naive as manager of the mind and gives dramatic credibility to what we have not built. We need to understand that our peace and our emotional health are worth gold, and the rest is garbage. If people learned this worldwide, from preschool to postgraduate, mental health professionals would have time to be artists because there would be far fewer patients. Generals would have time to write poetry because there would be far fewer wars. Police officers would have time to do more sports because there would be far fewer occurrences. Unfortunately, worldwide, our species, by not understanding this last frontier of science, walks with an enormous weight. There is pain in the soul of those who know that solutions exist for our species to become more viable, more harmonious, more generous. Whites and blacks were never different. Skin color is just a thin layer. The same intellectuality, the same emotionality, the same action of the self as protagonist can be operated in all. It has always been so. There is no difference between Orientals and Westerners, intellectuals and illiterates, rich and poor. We are unique and unrepeatable human beings. But honestly, we not only walk on the surface of planet Earth, we walk on the surface of the mind planet. The mind lies. So what is the mind and what is the self? The self is the maximum expression of human consciousness. The self is more than emotion, although it includes emotion. The self is more than intellectuality, although it includes thoughts. The self is much greater than a diagnosis of depression, much greater than panic syndrome. We are greater than our own pain. And every person who thinks about taking their life is hungry and thirsty to live. They just want to tame the mental ghosts. But as the self is not fed, is not nurtured, it is not empowered to understand the contradictions of the mind. If you learn and train yourself not to buy what doesn't belong to you, to create a fundamental filter, you can be offended, can be criticized, can be excluded, but this doesn't hurt you because what is said is virtual. They are just sounds. Your emotional health becomes untouchable, but the self worldwide is passive, fragile, suffocating. And that's why the work of educating the self, training volunteers to emergency attend people at risk, teaching emotion management free of charge worldwide is so important. People have never been so alone in the midst of the crowd, so connected to the world, but disconnected from themselves. Social loneliness of being physically alone is dramatic, but still bearable. The second loneliness is worse and more insidious. It is the loneliness of self-abandonment, where the self gives up on itself. And no human being should give up on themselves. The self has to be stubborn, the self has to be rebellious, the self has to have authority. The self has to be the agent of change, where we make no concessions. Self-esteem cannot have shyness. Shyness and self-esteem are opposites. When someone betrays you, you should tell the traitor, whoever lost was you. I'm beautiful, wonderful, intelligent. Oh, but they never bought flowers. So what? Go to the florist yourself and buy the best bouquet of flowers because you deserve it. When the self leaves the condition of victim, fragile, insecure, everything changes. The self is how we see ourselves. It is the representation of what we are. It is our identity, our capacity for autonomy, our capacity for choice. It is the agent of transformation, change, and repagination of our story. You don't change the past, but you change the future by rewriting the present. But this self is not just a self that performs daily tasks, that goes to buy a car, pay a bill, carry out a project. It is a self that is aware that it is the pilot of the human mind. It is a self that is aware that it not only produces thoughts, but has 4 co-pilots working with it. The first co-pilot is the memory trigger. While you are talking, while you are listening, the trigger automatically fires, opening thousands of windows or mental files. The second co-pilot is the memory windows themselves. The third is the anchor, which generates focus and concentration, which generates the efficiency or not of the learning process. Without focus, without the anchor, you cannot concentrate, assimilate and learn. But there is a problem. The anchor can generate a serious dualism, hyperfocus. If someone offends you and you buy the offense, give it credit, open a killer window. The volume of anxiety is so great at that moment that it closes the memory circuit. Hyperfocus means that thousands of files with millions of data are not accessed. At this moment, the intelligent human being becomes an animal. In the first seconds of hyperfocus, parents say words they should never say to their children. At this moment, suicidal acts occur. At this moment, murders can occur. At this moment, wars are triggered. At this moment, discrimination happens. Our species has a low level of viability. It is super intelligent and super creative. It builds poetry, but also weapons of mass destruction. It produces medicines, but also discriminates and excludes people. Our species is highly complex, but has a low level of viability because in hyperfocus, we develop a system called predator-prey. The human being can be a predator of their own children. The husband can be a predator of the wife predator of the husband. And in work relationships, many of the most important relationships are not operated by conscious intellectuality, by generosity, altruism, empathy, and encouragement. They are operationalized by triggers, by co-pilots, not by the self. So the trigger detonates, opens killer window, generates hyperfocus. And the fourth co-pilot, the flow of thoughts, starts to read and reread, and it becomes chaos. Think about how many people make solemn vows at a wedding, invite friends and relatives, have financial difficulty but spend a lot at that moment and promise that in health and sickness, in poverty and wealth, in joy and sadness, for all the days of life, they will love. Never has so much been lied about in so little time. Emotional hell is full of well-intentioned people. It's great to promise, but you have to promise that you will train every day, not that you will love every day. Because love begins with emotion, but only continues if there is admiration. And people don't know this. You don't love someone when that person stresses you. You don't love when they are impulsive. You don't love each other when you are arguing. But you can love if you become admirable. If someone raised their voice, you remember that your peace is worth gold. You exercise self-tools as emotion manager. You don't buy the argument, you lower your voice, you shock the other person with your mastery. And if the other person is also impulsive, you act within yourself and understand that there is even a charm in their defect. You can joke and say they are admirably impulsive. But this needs to be learned, needs to be trained to survive. You have to relax and dance the waltz with an unstiff mind. Couples start 100% saturated with affection, start well, but end badly. Because admiration decreases over time, as the person becomes a critic, a fault finder, apt to fix machines, but not to form brilliant minds. Who raises their voice is not admirable. Who is a critic is also not admirable. Who repeats the same thing several times is not admirable. Who pressures is not admirable. Who demands recognition is not admirable. Does not enchant, does not form light windows. The automatic memory recording phenomenon is recording either traumatic windows or light windows. What do you want with your child when they make a mistake? Are you going to scold them, point out the error because they were rebellious? Why don't you change your interpersonal relations policy? Why, instead of embarrassing them, don't you say, "Child, I am proud of you. You are incredible. You are intelligent. Now think about your behavior." At this exact moment, your child will be in shock because they were expecting another scolding, another pressure, another sermon, and you show elegance, admirability. You show greatness, poetry, and interpersonal relationships. But this is training. It won't work overnight. Over years, we incorporate these tools and empower the self as manager of the human mind. This mastery is the fruit of training, time, research, consciousness. And it is important to understand that every political leader, every professional, every father and mother should be just the hired employee with a set term to be fired, and should accept being fired, go away and be certain that there are much more capable people on the great journey. A true leader is someone who does a lot with little, while an emotionally poor person needs a lot to feel little, needs many stimuli, recognition, applause. That's why many digital celebrities get sick over time. Fame and power are not good for mental health. Fame and power are suffocating because they generate windows that increase the level of demand to be happy, fulfilled, and relaxed. In the beginning, the first autographs, the first hugs, the first recognition had a much greater impact on emotionality than when you have established success. Every time you train someone who is a world leader or world athlete, the important question is, have you already lost? How so? You have already lost because without you knowing, you sabotaged yourself, became your own executioner. You promoted a phenomenon called psychoadaptation, which is the inability of human emotion to feel pleasure or pain before the same stimuli. A person buys an old car that barely works and feels enormous happiness. Decades later, they buy a luxury car and have less pleasure in the current phase than in the initial phase because they have been recording through automatic memory recording windows that increase the level of demand to be happy, fulfilled, and relaxed. That's why every famous person who achieves success has to make a second journey, the journey of the heart. If they don't make the journey of the heart, the inner journey, success will become a trap, a mental prison. Even if we don't consciously self-sabotage, psychoadaptation itself makes us unable to feel the same pleasure, the same joy before the same stimuli. There is a serious phenomenon that clearly demonstrates this. Parents, when they are before their baby children, who don't understand jokes much, who don't understand complex language, they become good-humored, have fun, joke around. Over time, when children learn language, in adolescence, do parents become good-humored? No, they psycho-adapted. Parents laugh less, have less fun, laugh out loud less. Psycho-adaptation is cruel. People lose enchantment with their children. When children don't know how to speak, parents want to steal every word. When they learn the art of dialogue, dialectical linguistic thought, parents stop communicating what is most relevant. Parents abort dialogue. This is cruel to our species, and it is not a particularity of one culture or country. It is a characteristic of humanity, of all peoples, of all cultures, and of all generations. When you go through chaos, when you experience a deep depressive state, you can have the most incredible encounter with yourself. You can find the address within yourself. We are walkers who need to find the address inside. Many emotional paupers live in palaces because they never found the address within themselves. An emotionally rich person is someone who does a lot with little. An emotionally poor person needs a lot to feel little. Pain can become the most important teacher in the most incredible school, which is the school of existence. Why are you depressed? Why are you suffering? Why are you not happy? Why don't you contemplate beauty? Why can't you engage with people? Why can't you control your thoughts? What kind of mind is this that produces so many toxic thoughts at such a high speed? Why do you drive a vehicle but don't drive your own emotion? When you start writing every day, when you have an insight, a discovery of your own being, the self begins to identify with itself. The self begins to take the first positions. And you can write hours a day in improvised places, dark, full of boxes, developing ideas, seeking to share knowledge. And it may be a desert at the beginning, a caustic journey where nobody opens doors. But when you are faithful to your own conscience, you have an unpayable debt to yourself. The dream of building something new to contribute to humanity is born because pain makes you understand the pain of others. From that moment, you begin to see people differently. A patient with a terminal illness is not just a clinical case. It is a person with tears that were never cried, pains that were never verbalized, fears, anguishes. And you can spend time with deep listening, hearing the inaudible, seeing the invisible. Each human being should never diminish themselves for having an emotional crisis, for having a conflict. even a psychosis. Each human being is unique and unrepeatable. Even in a psychosis, when ideas are produced outside the parameters of reality, this does not reflect intellectual smallness. We are so great that we can break with reality, something that no artificial intelligence will ever have. Artificial intelligence will never have doubt, will never feel anguished, lonely, will never be afraid. This is proper to the complex intellectuality and emotionality captained by the self, which can be both virtual and real, if it empowers itself or if it weakens itself. You can leave success and return to the interior to continue writing, developing theory. Nobody understands, nobody supports, except someone who accompanies the journey and believes. And this person may think the fever will pass, that soon you will worry about more practical things and forget about producing theory in a country that doesn't value its scientists. But this fever never passes. 17 years can pass writing continuously, entering at 9 in the morning and leaving at 10 at night, continuing to write. And when you publish the first book and it doesn't succeed because nobody understood, because you have to change 500 terms, this can be devastating. How to do 500 plastic surgeries on the first child. But you try, and sometimes it really doesn't work. Nobody understands. Nothing sells. Then you start to democratize knowledge. You write thinking virtually, imaginarily, before people of all backgrounds, beliefs, cultures. You write and rewrite at least 5 to 10 times each work. You polish words. You write poetically. You cross philosophy, sociology, medicine, science with colloquial language that can even be set to music. You create stories that are true films, where an atheist researcher defends theses and various people watch that transmitted discussion, and whoever reads or watches is there present in that discussion. And in one of these stories, you address a very important period, where a great atheist, someone who builds knowledge about the process of thought construction, someone who studies that intellectuality is virtual and emotionality is real, someone who knows that pure memory does not exist, this unconformed, restless, curious, questioning atheist went to investigate. This atheist studied how great thinkers went outside the curve, freed their imagination, and built new ideas. Studied brilliant minds, how they functioned, how they developed complex theories without mentors, and went to a specific historical figure expecting to find a person without great intellectuality, without great impacts, and was astonished, was perplexed. At the exact moment this figure was betrayed with a kiss, the blow of betrayal should detonate the trigger, open killer window and generate hyperfocus, transforming the intelligent human being into an animal. Being betrayed is one of the most anguishing experiences. There are people who fight or never relate again after a betrayal. But to complete astonishment, this figure looked at the traitor and exalted them, called them friend. He was not afraid of being betrayed. He was afraid of losing a friend. His peace was worth gold. The rest was garbage. It was non-negotiable. He would not sell even for his traitor his emotional health. His self did not give autogenous credibility. He knew that behind there was a person in conflict. He did not buy what did not belong to him. What autonomy is this? In history, great thinkers always excluded whoever contradicted them, but this man included his traitor in the act of betrayal. If the great atheists of history studied this mind, free from bias, passion, rejection, exclusion, they would probably follow him, even if they did not become religious. When he called the traitor friend, he went further. He asked, "Friend, why are you here?" He knew why he was there. He had predicted hours before, but unlike those who give ready answers, he wanted people to think critically, even using the obvious. He used the method of questions at a level that was never imagined. What happened? The traitor came out of hyperfocus, threw away the coins, almost became a thinker who would change the trajectory of his story and the history of humanity. But in the middle of the way, he detonated the trigger again, experienced everything he lived. opened double-killer window of cruel guilt, of intense self-demand, which is an executioner of mental health, generated hyperfocus, and he attempted against his own life. But it was not supposed to be like this. Hours later, another character was wounded and mutilated. He denied his master once, hyperfocus, denied again, more intense hyperfocus. The third time he reached the point of blasphemy, denying vehemently. His error was not smaller, it was even more intense. But at the exact moment he erred, their eyes met, and this figure shouted without saying words, "I understand you, you can deny me, but I know who you are despite all your erratic behavior. When words fail, we have to learn to shout in silence." Sometimes silence is much more powerful than millions of words that try to tame or correct people. That young man who was hyperactive, tense and anxious, who hours before had cut someone's ear because he missed his aim, almost committing murder, went to cry and changed his story. That young man without academic culture, who would not influence anyone beyond a kilometer from where he was born, together with other young people with similar characteristics, a completely dysfunctional team of young people with various problems. How could this group have generated the greatest transformation of humanity? 11 young people changed the world. Today, 11 million don't change anything. Because that figure trained those young people to love education, to love humanity, not to bow to pain. Trained to see a person rejected by society as a queen. Trained to see someone with contagious disease that everyone rejects as a prince. Showed that if a person wants to be great, they have to make themselves small to make the small great. Then atheism changed. There was no way to resist. Never has anyone so great been investigated so deeply. And when you face what really happened, in various versions, in the most diverse biographies, studied as a researcher, writing more than 1,000 pages of analysis, there is no way not to be transformed. There is no way not to realize that if you were in the medieval era of the Inquisition, you would be the first to be thrown into the fire for this audacity. When you publish for the first time about this, they say it will cause a worldwide scandal, that no one has ever done this, that you should not write about this. But you need to be faithful to your own conscience, and then thousands of people of all religions, of all beliefs, read these works. People embrace with affection, thank because the works touch their lives. You become someone without religious borders. People should have their religions if they wish. It is important to be together, but they should never forget that they should never discriminate against others. A mature and intelligent person does not consider their different as people of lesser value or as enemies to be taken down. Those who have different thoughts and ideas are not enemies. Every leader should love their society much more than their party and their ideology. Only those who are detached from power are worthy of it. Only those who have a love affair with humanity and their society are worthy of power. When you look at the world and see so much polarization, so much radicalization, societies divided because people think differently, instead of understanding that ideas should never distance us, but should stimulate pleasant, intelligent, and altruistic debate, you need to be someone with a capitalist mind and social heart. In a country with so many inequalities, so much suffering, so many people who need to be embraced, supported, included, and have equal opportunity, we have to be social. You can't be just on one side. You can't have a free business environment where people work with freedom and where taxes are reduced, and at the same time not embrace millions of young people who neither work nor study. We have to have a macro vision of society. Teachers are the most important professionals in the social theater, but they are cooks of knowledge who prepare food for an audience that has no appetite because of digital intoxication. We have to make a change in education. Imagine millions of young people in high school, in public schools, and a large part of them leave without technical education, without learning financial management, digital marketing, without learning to work with artificial intelligence, without learning nursing and other professions? How are we going to form knowledge and change the country if we don't invest in education? While we spend trillions to roll debts, each child and teenager born already owes thousands and pays high interest. The future of these children is not a partisan issue. We should think as humanity, not think only as a religion, a philosophy, an ideology, a party, a culture. We should have a love affair with our human family. A true political leader is just the employee of society hired by vote with a set term to be fired and should accept being fired. Go away and be certain that there are much more capable people on the great journey of society. There should be a coalition government, a pacification government, a government of notable people. There shouldn't even be re-election, really. The need for perpetuation of power is not healthy. Power and the cult of celebrity are not good for mental health. Fame is not good for mental health, so power should be exercised and after one term never return to leave more capable, more intelligent, more efficient people occupying leadership in the most diverse instances. When you ask for advice from the author of life, from the one who hides behind the curtain of time and space, who puts their signature on a hummingbird when it takes a drop of water to its offspring, who puts their signature on water scarcity, on cutting winds in low temperatures of winters and makes flowers bloom in springs, you ask, where do I go? Life is beautiful and brief like drops of dew that appear for an instant and soon dissipate with the first solar rays of time. With 60-something years and a well-lived life, knowing that not much more time remains, perhaps 15 or 20 years, if there is the privilege of living these years, what can be done to contribute more to humanity? Where to go? When you go around the world in world projects, when you want to give programs to hundreds of thousands of teachers across entire continents, when you want to spread emotion management academies free of charge in all countries of the world, when you want to take entrepreneur academies wherever necessary, where to go? The advice you ask from the one whose face you have never seen is to have a minimum of security in a life that is a risk contract to know what you can do a little more to contribute to this species you are passionate about, the human species. How does this greater force speak? It speaks in silence, shouts without speaking a word. Spirituality has to be intelligent. It has to contemplate the different. It has to make our story a life worth living. It has to lead to making small things a spectacle to the eyes. Once walking with someone dear through the streets, you find an old house all cracked, split, faded. You ask, what beauty is there in this house? The answer comes, there is no beauty, it is falling apart. But each crack has stories, has tears, each brick has dreams, has nightmares. You need to learn to see the invisible and hear the inaudible. Spirituality, independent of religion, has to lead to maturity of the self. It has to lead the self to make small things a show for existence. One of the most important functions is to lead to buy and acquire what money cannot conquer. Talk about tears so that people understand there are no skies without storms. Talk about the saddest days so that people have courage to write the most important chapters in the most dramatic moments of existence. Emotional age does not correspond to biological age. There are young people of 20 years with 80, 100 years of emotional age. You can feel 20 years old even if the body doesn't help. The mind rejuvenates, never stops working until the last instant. Always have projects that impact humanity, always contribute. This is the secret of eternal success. Passion for humanity, passion for contribution. Life is very brief to be lived and dramatically long to make mistakes. 24 hours pass quickly, the month passes quickly, emotional time passes 3 or 4 times faster than biological time. We live 80 years, but 80 years pass like 20. Soon, You are in the final years of history, of the journey. It is too fast to be lived, but paradoxically long to make mistakes, to raise your voice, to criticize, to consider opponents as enemies to be taken down, to have neurotic need for power, anxious need to be the center of social attention, which are unhealthy needs that do not contemplate mental health, creativity, the self as protagonist and author of one's own story. Pain taught the relevance of life. Chaos taught. The teacher was wonderful, made you cry, made you deeply analyze anguish, depressive mood, disturbing thoughts, the brevity of life, the finitude of existence, the chaos of death. All this became a continuous source of learning. You see almost every day that you are before the end of existence. And unlike what people think, thinking about the end of existence leads to valuing life as a spectacle. When you think you are immortal, you pass over others with ease. Thinking about death helps immensely to value life. Every day you think about it, theorize about it, think about chaos, about what will happen when billions and trillions of information will be lost in solitude. What are we? We are just walkers who walk in the path of time, in search of ourselves, of the most important address, the address that few find. This protects immensely. Being among the most read could make you proud. Being among the most recognized worldwide could make you feel above something. But no, you are an eternal apprentice. When you produce a theory without precedent, when you speak of the paradoxical loneliness of virtual consciousness, where you are infinitely close to everything and everyone, generating a vital anxiety that leads to philosophize, to build relationships, to seek intelligent spirituality, to seek to build dreams and projects. No one had ever said that there is a healthy anxiety that is the motivating spring of humanity. The fact of being close but infinitely distant makes you search. This fluctuation is in a virtual matrix, in a bubble, on an island, on a virtual continent, and this makes you build bridges every day. The human being who stops building bridges will never be relevant. Relevant people form successors and not heirs. Heirs are squanderers of inheritances. Relevant people lead those who want to leave a legacy. Heir children want everything fast and ready. Successor children think medium and long term. Heirs do not bow in gratitude because they do not perceive that life is extremely complex and that we leave one womb for a social womb with the help of others, and we will leave the social womb for the womb of the earth, also with the help of others, with nothing, at the two most important extremes of existence. Heirs do not see the complexity of life. Successors see that it is extremely complex and that we are dependent. The dream in life is to reach the top, but in reality we are born at the top if we are mature and intelligent, and we become more humble throughout our story because we come to understand more the existence, the complexity, and our limitations. Yourself has to leave the audience, enter the stage of your mind and make a scandal, not accept being written by people who frustrate you, disappoint you, or even by your toxic thoughts. Never give up directing the script of your story, because your story is your responsibility. And no professional, no leader, no trainer can do this for you. Please date life before dating someone. This is the final message for 8 billion people. Date life. Be relevant, contribute, train yourself to be the pilot of your own mental aircraft, and understand that my piece is worth gold, the rest is garbage.